I'm going to tell you the story of how I paid my student loans off in less than 9 months at my very first sales job. Welcome to Final Expense Telesales. I'm Dana Neeson, and I'm outside today. It's story time. So I am about 22, 23 years old. I am just finishing up my senior year at California State University, Northridge. I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in kinesiology with a minor in nutrition. Now that I know everything I learned about nutrition is wrong, as I was taught in school. And I was just transitioning, about to start my master's program. And at the time, I was a waitress at Claim Jumper and had just been introduced to someone who would single-handedly change the trajectory of the rest of my life. And that person is my now husband, who, when I was only 22, 23 years old, we were set up by our parents, who were members at the same country club and thought we were both doing a terrible job of meeting a significant other. So we were set up. Long story short, him and his dad and a friend at the time came to the Claim Jumper where I was working to meet me as a waitress. And his dad and my now husband were running a merchant services company where you're selling to small and medium-sized businesses credit card processing. And his dad just thought I would be so great in sales, just with, I guess, my personality and how I interacted with people. And he basically tried to recruit me out of my waitressing job and into a sales job. Said that I could, do it instead. I could work part-time, I could still go to school, but I was gonna make so much money that I probably wouldn't even want to be in school anymore. So over the summer, between the end of graduating college and the start of my first year in my master's, I worked full-time with them. And it was my first introduction to sales. They were sending out mailers to people that had just opened up their DBA, and they would get people to call in, and they were advertising a free cruise for two to get merchants to call in to set up their credit card processing with us. And at the time, the only way the sales agents made money was by leasing these credit card machines that probably cost them no more than $99. And we would lease them for $29, $39, $49, $69, $99 a month for 36 months. And we would get a commission on that. And I kind of got addicted, right away. And even the sales process was so different then as it is today. I mean, I had a little script that I followed. We had a really old-fashioned CRM system. And by the time we had to get the contract signed, it was only done by fax. And it was a 26-page application that required initials at the bottom of every page because it was a lease for the machine, is really what they were signing for, in addition to the credit card processing. And so they would have to get to a fax machine. Sometimes I would have people drive to a Kinko's or somewhere like a FedEx close to them where they could access a fax machine, and I would have to fax all 26 pages to them. Sometimes I would stay on the phone with them while they were driving, and then wait for them to go through the whole thing. I would summarize what all 26 pages meant, and then they would have to fax every single page back to me, and it would have to come through with clear margins, or the merchant services company at the time, First Data, they wouldn't accept it. They would actually return the application. So it was a long process just to send the fax and receive it back. I mean, when that fax machine would ding, there was like a row of 10 or 15 fax machines in a row all down the sales room floor. And as soon as those fax machines would ding, we would all mute and we would yell, "Money, money, money's coming, someone's getting money." And it was kind of the joke at our sales floor in the time. And it definitely, I got the bug. I got the bug for sales, even though I did not know what I was doing. But we were in sort of a boiler room type setting where you would just have rows and rows of salespeople, no cubicles separating us. We just have a desk and a computer and a headset, and we'd be in a rotation to get the calls. Eventually, like 1 month in, I started going in. I was the very first person to show up at the beginning of the day. So that'd be like around 7 a.m. And I would be the last one to leave at the end of the day, which was probably about 7 p.m. And I saw the money potential that sales could bring in my first month. I mean, I think I had gotten, I don't know, like a $3,000 or $4,000 commission check my first month selling. And that was really exciting for me. Someone who was just waitressing, making very little money in tips. I just was racking up a ton of debt. Like I had gotten, my entire college education was paid for by student loans. So I was going to be responsible for paying it back. And I think there were other loans too that we had to get to pay for part of the housing, but it didn't cover the whole thing. So I was barely making enough money just to pay whatever bills I had and to, feed myself and get through college. The time I'm in my second month, I'm working 12 hours. I'm quickly turning into the number 2 salesperson on the floor, right behind the number 1 salesperson who I never did actually catch. But he was my very first sales mentor, and also one of the reasons that I chose to stick with sales, because he had just taught me so much so early on. By the end of my 3rd month, I had made the decision that I was not going to go back to school. I had dropped out of the master's program, and I was going to sell full time from here on out. For the rest of that year, which was another, 6 months or so, I worked 12-hour days. I worked the weekends. I worked holidays, right? I'm a 23-year-old kid, not married. I don't have children. I have no responsibilities but myself. And once I saw those $10,000 checks coming in, I knew that this was my ticket out of debt. Like I was going to pay my student loans off. I was in this new relationship who was also happened to be my boss. I had a feeling things were going to get serious, and I didn't want this person having to absorb the debt that I had accumulated. My dad had also been paying for my car at the time, and I didn't want him to have to keep paying for that anymore because he was struggling as well. And so I had these goals, these very clear goals for myself, that I wanted to get out of debt. I wanted to pay my credit cards off because I had also racked up credit card debt, student loan debt. My car payment at the time that my dad was paying for was close to $500 a month plus insurance. And I just wanted to be in a position where people were not paying for things for me anymore. I also did not grow up with a silver spoon. My parents divorced when I was 3, and I had myself and my younger sister who was 1. And at the time, living with just my mom primarily, we grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment. My mom worked 2 jobs. My sister and I, shared everything, shared a room. We had a little living space in the middle, and then my mom's bedroom on one side and our bedroom on the other side. And that's really how I grew up. But we were in a very poor part of the valley in California, and I have this memory one time where we came home from daycare. We were always the last ones to get picked up from daycare in our elementary school. And when we got home that night, I remember we'd walk into the door and the kitchen was to the right. It's one of those like long rectangular shaped kitchens. And I remember looking down to the right and onto the floor, and where the linoleum tile was, it was a light colored tile. It was black. And I couldn't figure out in that moment why the floor had changed colors. And then as I kept staring at it, I noticed that the black was actually moving. There was movement there. And as I looked at it even further, I noticed the movement was cockroaches. And the cockroaches were covered the floor to where you really couldn't even see it. Then I looked behind me, and the cockroaches were up the door, and they were down by our feet. And all of a sudden we realized what was happening, and we had to get out. And I remember we had to stay at a friend's house for a while till my mom found a safer place for us to live. And I'm just sharing that story with you because what I share today on social media is not that picture at all. My kids have everything they could ever want, probably to a fault, right? They're not going to have the same perspective that I had growing up as a kid. So now that I'm in this position at 23, to give myself this financial freedom without having to have a trade or a specialty or a job or work my way up, it was just instant. All because of an opportunity for leads that someone handed to me, and all I had to do was follow a script and show up. I mean, that was it. That was my ticket. That was my ticket out. And I did everything I possibly could do to make sure that I made as much money as I could, and I learned everything that I could to get myself out of debt, to get to where my dad didn't have to pay for my car anymore. And I did it all in 9 months. In 9 months, I had completely paid off my 4-year college loans at a state university. I had completely paid off all my credit card debt. I remember walking on the balcony when I was working one day, and I had paid off the debt, and I was at the point where my dad no longer had to pay my car payment anymore. And my dad has lived in his van for years and years and years by choice. He's always been like a blue collar worker, always owned his own business, had a vending machine company for a long time, did truck driving for a long time. Actually, he was a PGA teaching pro when I was growing up at a private country club in Valencia, and for a short time was on the senior tour. So he has quite a colorful story, but at this time, he was doing the vending machine business and was doing okay, but I did not want to be on his payroll anymore. So I remember I walked out to the balcony and I called him, picked up the phone. He says, "Hi, Kins, how you doing?" And that's one of my nicknames. He calls me Kinsey. And he says, "Hey, Kins, how you doing?" And I said, "Dad, I have some really great news for you." And he said, "Oh yeah? What's that?" I said, "Starting today, you no longer have to pay for my car. I am going to take that over and do it all myself. You no longer have to pay for anything for me." And it was such a proud moment for me to be able to just take control of my life, that no one had to support me anymore, that as long as I was in sales, I was going to be okay. And I think the biggest thing that stood out for me in the first year that I was working was my work ethic, that I was just so determined to not fail, that being the first one to show up, being the last one to leave, being the only one coming in on weekends, being there on holidays to field any inbound calls that would come in so I could be the one to get it live and not the day before or when we got back to work. I was obsessed, right? I was obsessed from the beginning of being number one, of mastering it, of getting that financial freedom. There was no other option for me but to let that obsession determine the trajectory of how the rest of my sales career would go. And, from there, the rest is history. I'm now 44, so I have now been in sales for well over 20 years. I have been in 3 different sales careers leading up to where I'm in today. But if you are in your 20s or your 30s or whatever age you are, and you are just now making the decision to dip your toe into the world of sales, and want to eventually get to a position maybe where I'm at, or where other leaders are at, or other people that you admire that you see on social media or on YouTube, the work that it took to get here, it was real. It was real. I was not handed anything. I was not blessed with, how great I was in the beginning. I had to work my butt off to get the same results as some of the other veteran guys that had been there for, their whole careers already in sales. And so you have to be willing to work your butt off. You have to be willing to be the first one that shows up in the morning and the last one that logs off during the day, to work on the weekends, to master the craft, to, get the coaching and ask for help, and ultimately to not give up. And you cannot have a plan B. You have to go all in. And that mentality of saying, I have no other choice, I have no other option, I'm not going to fall back to the master's program or continue to rack up more student loan debt, because I was about to rack up another 2-3 years of student loan debt going into my master's program, really because I was just trying to figure out what to do next. And so that's my story of how I paid off my student loans after just 9 months of being in sales as a young 22, 23-year-old kid with no sales experience, no idea what I was doing, but work ethic alone and following a process and direction that someone above me gave me, taught me everything I needed to know about where I was going to go next. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you so much for watching if you made it to the end. If you found value from this, please give this video a like. If you'd like to share a part of your sales story, please post it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.